for setting me on my way. So croeso and welcome to you all. It's great to see you all here today to share the outcomes of the Colega Cymru's Taith Pathway 2 project on preventing and tackling misogyny in the FE sector. We also want to share some research and learnings from organisations in Canada, Scotland and Wales. So I'm Catherine Lewis, I'm Principal of NPTC Group of Colleges, and I'll be chairing the event today. I'll ensure that we keep to time, especially as this is a late afternoon event in Wales. So for our Canadian colleagues, on the other hand, we do appreciate you just starting your day. So thank you very much for joining us. Before we begin, a very quick housekeeping point to help our session run as smoothly as possible. So first off, please keep your microphone on mute. This helps minimise background noise, ensures everyone can hear the speakers clearly. Use the chat function. There will be time for some questions after each presentation. You can raise your hand using the raise hand function or submit your question or comment via the chat at any point. A member of the Colega Cymru team will monitor the chat elements throughout and will address questions hopefully during the Q&A at the end. In the event that we run out of time, and we will be keeping strictly to time, we'll follow up any unanswered questions after the event, and we anticipate we will have some because it's such a fascinating topic as well. Welsh and English are welcome, so please contribute in both our languages, and we will try and field the questions through the chat function in Welsh as well. As you can see, we are recording this session, so please note that it is being recorded. Cameras, we'd love you to keep them on if you're comfortable. We encourage you to do that to help create a more engaging and interactive atmosphere as we talk on this virtual setting, but there's absolutely no pressure to do this, and if you want to turn the camera off, that's absolutely fine as well. Resources and follow-ups generally, any slides, links or resources referenced during the session will be shared after the event. So please be reassured, you don't have to scribble everything down like you had to do early on in an event, you can have everything afterwards as well. If you experience any technical difficulties, please let us know via the chat and a member of the team will assist if we're able to. And stating the absolutely blindingly obvious, often our technical issues are resolved by leaving the meeting and re-entering. That's as far as I'm going to get on that technical point. So let's get us all started. First of all, I am extremely chuffed to welcome Sian Holleran from Colega Cymru. She's going to provide us with an overview of the Taith project, its outcomes and what the next steps are. So Sian, I'm muting myself and it's over to you.
Diolch yn fawr, Catherine. Thank you very much, Catherine. Prynawn da pawb, good afternoon. Fy enw yw Sian Holleran, rheolwr prosiectau rhyngwladol Colegau Cymru. My name is Sian Holleran. I'm International Project Manager at Colegau Cymru, Colleges Wales. I'm not going to do everything bilingually because we'd be here all day, but parts of my presentation will be done bilingually. Along with Vicky Thomas, the project officer, I led on this Taith Pathway 2 project. Vicky can't be with us today, unfortunately. She's on annual leave. Thailand or Wales, what would you do? But I am going to share my screen now and just give you a brief overview of the project and the outcomes of the project. So let me just share my screen. Lucy, can you see that? Okay.
That's perfect now. I think
Great.
so. Isn't it, Luce? Just checking with the boss. Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So just obviously this was a Taith Pathway 2 project. Taith is the Welsh Government's International Learning Exchange Programme, and the Pathway 2 strands of funding supports Welsh-led collaborative international partnerships which address a specific issue or a sector priority in Wales. There's a link on the slide which will take you to the Taith website if you would like further information on funding. And Taith will be running its Pathway 1 application round in January 2026. So please go and have a look. It's provided us with some excellent opportunities as an FE sector to engage with international partners. I'm going to be a little bit innovative here in the way I'm going to present this, so I really do hope that this works. Heddiw rwy'n mynd I rannu canlyniadau'r prosiect a'ch cymryd ar daith o fai 24 hyd at heddiw. So I'm going to share some information on the project and take you on a little journey from the May 2024 until the present day, letting you know what has happened and what set this project in motion. So we applied for Taith funding to address issues that were raised in Estyn's 2023 report, peer-on-peer abuse among 16 to 18-year-olds in FE colleges in Wales. We partnered with Colleges and Institutes Canada, a similar membership organisation to Colegau Cymru based in Canada. Our focus was on preventing and tackling misogyny, which was highlighted as a concern in the report, with evidence from some learners in FE colleges of not feeling safe in some areas of their college and staff lacking the confidence to intervene effectively to address harmful comments and attitudes. We were successful in getting funding, and we had a grant agreement in place with Taith in May 2024. So between October and April 2025, we achieved our first milestone in October, which was to have an international community of practice in place. We had 5 members in Wales: Charlotte Dando from Cardiff and Vale College, Lisa Purcell, Coleg y Cymoedd, Alice Churm, Coleg Cambria, Tom Snellgrove, Coleg Sir Gar, Coleg Ceredigion, and Maxine Thomas from Pembrokeshire College. Colleges and Institutes Canada recruited 5 members in Canada, and they were Trina Prince from Kwantlen Polytechnic University, Keith Campbell and Asimboyne College, Mariette Kalinga, College Boreal, Leanne Kendall Perfect, Sheridan College, and Catherine Montmany-Grenier from College Maisonneuve. I just want to say at this point what a real privilege it's been to work with these people. They've become friends, they're not just colleagues and experts in their field of work. So what we did once the International Community of Practice had been set up was to set up a Basecamp platform. So we had a forum where we could communicate with each other, we could share resources, share research papers, anything of interest really, that we could share between us as a community of practice. And building the community of practice happened in phases, really. Phase 1, I would say, was building some trust and building up the relationships between the members, getting to know each other professionally and personally. And that's not that easy online. And we also, with our Canadian colleagues, which we realised quite quickly, is they were spread massive distances apart across Canada. So we buddied up a member from Wales with a member from Canada and took some time to get to know each other, so that phase 2, where we were more focused on learning about each other's areas of expertise, became a little bit easier. Phase 3, I would say, was where we developed a more targeted focus based on what we were learning from each other, and particularly what we learned when the community of practice members went from Wales to Canada in May 2025. So the 5 members from Wales travelled to Montreal in Canada just after the Easter holidays this year, and we were fortunate to be joined by Catherine Lewis, who's chairing this session today. Catherine is also co-chair of Colegau Cymru's Learner Experience Group and principal of MPTC Group of Colleges. You will hear from Tara Santavica after my presentation. Tara is from Montreal University and presented her research on social polarisation amongst youth to us while we were in Canada. Following that presentation, our discussions in Canada as a community of practice focused on exploring how to understand misogyny through a young person's eyes, and also how could we engage with male FE learners in conversations around this topic without alienating them. So when we came back from Canada, don't know how I did that, apologies. Oh.
That's fine, it looks fine.
You're on a roll, Sean. You okay?
Okay, I'm sorry. I can just see my transcript appearing, but as long as you can't see that, that's fine. So when we came back from Montreal, we had lots of ideas, lots of things to discuss. And what we also found with the project, that we were engaging with other organisations who were working in this area of work. One of those people was Irene from the More Collective up in Scotland, and Irene will be presenting to you later today. And also Anne-Marie from Our Voice, Our Journey, who's based here in Wales. One of Irene's comments when she met with us struck a chord with me really is that boys aren't initially going online to look for misogynistic content. Their starting point could be quite an innocent question like, how do I get a girlfriend? How do I get more muscular? But very quickly, through the power of algorithms, they get drawn into harmful online content. So this again focused our attention really on the importance of how we talk to young men about misogyny. Anne-Marie from Our Voice, Our Journey, The Power of LinkedIn. I got in touch with Anne-Marie because she was setting up quite a number of different conversations on LinkedIn and had been working with Matt Brown from an organisation called She Is Not Your Rehab in New Zealand. Matt delivers impactful talks to large audiences of men, drawing on his own life story with a really strong message to boys about childhood trauma, and that isn't their fault, but that their healing is absolutely their responsibility. So in October 2025, with support from Anne-Marie, we organised 2 large events, one in Cardiff City Football Stadium and one up in Coleg Cambria in Wrexham, where we had over 400 16 to 70-year-old learners from colleges across Wales who listened to Matt's talk in the morning, and Anne-Marie set up a staff planning session in Cardiff in the afternoon and a learner session for boys in North Wales. I'm going to share a video with you at the end of my presentation so that you can hear firsthand some of the reactions of the boys who heard those talks. And finally, we hosted our Canadian Community of Practice members in Wales in October 2025. We had a programme of college visits that we put together for the Community of Practice members. We did a workshop together at Colegau Cymru's annual conference, and we also, for Trina especially, snuck in a few castle visits because there's plenty of those to see in Wales. So we had a really positive week in Wales with our Canadian partners as well. So here we are in December. The project is going to end at the end of this month, and this is one of our dissemination and sharing opportunities that we're doing as part of the project. We're sharing to a wider audience in this event, and so please, if this project is new to you and you want to get more information after the event, do get in touch with us. We'd be happy to answer questions or to share more information with you. We clearly haven't come up with all the answers in relation to how we recognise, address and intervene effectively to misogyny in our college communities, but we do believe that we've taken some steps towards addressing those. We know that Matt Brown's talk had a positive impact on our male learners, and we also know that there is a need for staff training in this area of work. But in terms of what next, what are we doing next? We don't want to lose the momentum that we've garnered through this project. We're going to be developing Be More Than a Bystander training for staff in all colleges across Wales. This is training that we came across while we were in Canada, highlighted to us by Keith, who was one of our Community of Practice members, who also introduced us to Ashley in the Ending Violence British Columbia organisation. The USP of this particular training package is that the training is tailored specifically for staff and learners working in male-dominated trades curriculum areas. And Estin's thematic report this year on learner behaviour in further education colleges said this: male learners, particularly those on vocational trade courses like construction, are more likely to display negative behaviours. These include the use of inappropriate language towards female learners, often driven by an effort to fit in or assert dominance in predominantly male environments. So we're definitely going forward with some of the learning that we took from this project in terms of that training. We need to continue collectively with this work across Wales and build on the momentum of the project, build on our partnerships and the organisations presenting today, as well as the impact of Matt Brown's talks. Before I finish, I'd like to say what a privilege it's been to work with the Community of Practice: Trina, Keith, Mariette, Leanne, Katrine, Lisa, Tom, Maxine, Alice and Charlotte, also Vicky and Catherine. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn. I've learned so much from all of you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and Rachel is going to show you the video before we pass on to back to Catherine. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. So we're just getting the video set up for you, but thank you, Sian.
No sound, Rach. You're on mute. I don't know if that affects things.
Try again. Sorry, here we go. Is that
There we
okay?
are. Perfect.
As part of my work for ESTIN, the Education and Training Inspectorate for Wales, I had the opportunity to write a report on sexual harassment in further education colleges across Wales, and it's fantastic to see the 12 colleges working together with Colleges Wales to address one of the recommendations within that report, which was about developing strategies to prevent and tackle misogynistic behaviours and attitudes.
Great to be here today in Cardiff City Stadium, where we've been in the room together. We've had 400 learners thinking about how we can promote respectful relationships and tackle misogyny. This is in response to an ESTIN report about 2 years ago that really shone a light on some quite challenging behaviour in some of our colleges. And Colegau Cymru, working with our colleges across Wales, are working together to see what we can do to begin to change learner behaviour. This is part of an international project. We're working with a range of international partners, as we know we've got lots to learn and also lots to share as well. So delighted that we've been able to run events this week, both in Cardiff and in Wrexham, so that we're reaching learners right across Wales.
We at Taith have played a part in bringing She Is Not Your Rehab to Wales. So today they've been talking to college learners, trying to change attitudes towards gender-based violence in Wales. And I know they're doing a range of different things over the course of the week for practitioners as well. So at Taith, we first got involved with She Is Not Your Rehab with their work with the youth sector. So now to see it widening out to further education in colleges is fantastic. So ie, mae'n froen i fod yma heddiw. So fel rhan o Taith, ni di chwarae rhan mewn dod â She Is Not Your Rehab a Matt Brown I ddod i Gymru i siarad efo dysgwyr o colegau addysg bellach, I newid agweddau tuag at camdrin merched a fenywod. So mae jyst yn wych I weld y gwaith yma yn tyfu yng Nghymru I trio newid agweddau trwy sesiynau efo dysgwyr a siarad yn uniongyrchol efo dysgwyr hefyd.
Kia ora, talofa. It's a massive honour to be back here in Wales. This time around, spending and hanging out with over 500 boys, 15 to 17-year-olds. My message for all you lads is, yes, your childhood trauma wasn't your fault, but your healing is absolutely your responsibility.
I thought Matt's speech was very moving, especially for people of, well, all ages who have a story to tell without knowing a safe place to openly share their story. It gives them a sense of security and a support so they can actually talk about it before it gets bad. But when you deal with it at the start, it's easier to talk about it before it gets too bad and affects your mental health.
So I think it's great that events like today happen. I think it's great for our young people to have a positive voice and positive role models to hear that there is help and support available and how they can access that support, and that it is safe to speak, talk and say about your vulnerabilities. And I love the fact that we had Llwybr in there. I think that's a really positive message, and I just think today, events like today are really important for our young people growing up.
Yeah, today felt amazing. It felt like it properly came to my heart, not just the mind, like it went straight to me. I felt involved. I felt like it was something very engaging for not just me, for other boys and men, including teachers, not just students in this room. Felt close to home, like how he said it, straight to my heart.
That's great. Thank you, Sian, for sharing that with us. And I think that those of our colleagues who were able to attend one of the two events. I think that we all were impacted significantly by that, but there's so much more work to do. But the work collectively by the colleges that are being funded in this manner to do this community of practice activity and share it and disseminate across all our colleges is absolutely exceptional. So while we were in Canada, we had the absolute privilege of meeting Tara, and Sian's talked about her, who was a doctoral candidate at the University of Montreal, and she presented to us when we were there, social polarisation among Canadian youth in educational settings. It doesn't really rattle off the tongue very well, but I'm telling you now, this was so insightful. It really did shape some of our thinking and what we wanted to bring back to Wales, and some of the changes we all felt personally we wanted to achieve. So first of all, Tara, thank you so very, very much. Diolch yn fawr for joining us today. We realise it's exceptionally early for you this morning, and we absolutely appreciate your efforts with us and your expert input at this hour. Ideal world, we can have about 5 minutes at the end of your presentation for questions from the audience. But on that note, I'm going to pass over to your good self, Tara, and I'll mute myself again.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here with you this afternoon. Let's see, I'll share my screen and then we can get started. Are you able to see that well?
Yes, we can.
That's okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So as Catherine mentioned, my name is Tara Santivica. I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Montreal, and I also work with the Research and Action on Social Polarizations team in Montreal that looks at social polarization across all ages. And today I'll be presenting social polarization specifically among youth in the school context in Quebec, and I'll be ending off with some ideas and reflections that we can have moving forward. So when we think of in our global and digitalized world, we're witnessing rapid changes in society that contribute to social inequalities and tensions between communities and identities. And we define this as social polarization. So we can think of social polarization as the fragmentation of society into antagonist groups that emphasize their opposition and gradually reduce the range of nuanced positions. So these separations and divisions between groups that come together around common grievance usually give rise to inter-community tensions that leave little room for considered action and undermine what we call living together, or that social cohesion. So it's often reflected in a negative, simplistic, and dehumanizing representation of groups other than our own. And what we see is the dominant fault lines are often around linguistic, religious, gender, as we will be speaking about today, as well as political. And this is on the increase throughout society on the detriment of inclusive identities. So all these phenomena are not new to us. However, right now, as there's a rise in globalization with rapid social changes linked to mass migration, international conflicts, and climate change, just to name a few, these contribute to the increasing in social polarization and tensions around groups with opposite views in society. So, sorry about this. There we go. Oh, there we go. So when we think especially the increasing in violence and radical violence we're seeing in societies, and especially among young people, we're living in an international context, right? So we see the increasing racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia, which is impacting youth's lives as well as schools, where hate discourses and incidents are increasingly reported. So in light of all this, there's also an increase in psychological distress that I'll be discussing that has been reported in youth in the past decade and is not surprising. It indicates the presence of not just an individual suffering, but also a collective suffering that needs to be addressed among youth. So what makes this picture even more complex is the process that we are talking about. We're looking at social polarization, which has been further accelerated by situations like the pandemic that were heightened social injustices in our society, as well as digital media. So when we think of ideological violence and youth, adolescents and young adults are at increased risk of radicalization and violence, partly because adolescence is a key period for the development of ideologies and identity exploration, but also because of vulnerabilities to risk-taking that characterizes youth. So the developmental specificities that make them at risk of radicalization and violence is the natural phase of exploration throughout youth, but also the fact that both ideologies and attitudes change quite a lot at this time. So it's important to keep this in mind and not to panic as these ideologies might change in a day, or they might even change in a week. So it's really the normal process of adolescence that takes place, which increases their risk for support for violent radicalization. So when we talk about radicalization, we can think of this as an individual or collective process whereby either one more or more individuals and groups engage in specific actions to achieve a specific goal. So it can be political, social, religious, gender-based views. And usually we see that the normal practices of dialogue, compromise, and tolerance are gradually being abandoned in favor of increased engagement in confrontational and conflict tactics, albeit not necessarily in violent ways. And it's important to know that not all radicalization processes lead to support for violence or violent behaviors. We can think that radical ideas are a motor for social change and can lead to positive changes in society. And we can also, this also mirrors when we think of social polarization, that they can be opportunities for social transformations if given the opportunity to have discussions around these topics and essentially accompany youth throughout these tensions. So, however, in some cases, radical ideas can also be accompanied by the normalization or legitimization of violence, and this can contribute to violent radicalization phenomena. So it's important to also keep in mind that attitudes do not equal behavior. So even masculinist attitudes may not lead to behavior of violence towards women. And there's no consensus or linear process in terms of individuals and collectivities who are often seeking in-depth transformation, usually reject the status quo and use violence to bring about change. So when we think about this, how can we reduce the risks of violence while supporting youth's nonviolent contributions to society and thus not silencing youth's nonviolent activism? Because it's important for social change as we move through life. So today I will be presenting to you some risk factors, but also resilience factors among youth. You'll see that some of the findings are among college and university students across Quebec and Canada, as well as high school students in Montreal, which is within the province of Quebec. So some of the risk factors that we found among college students is that at a younger age, we saw a higher risk, a higher support for violent radicalization. We also saw that experiences of discrimination across all youth levels, so both high school students and college students, that this increased their risk for support for violent radicalization, as well as experiences of violence and harassment through youth and victimization both online and in person. So when you think of cyber victimization, this is included. Moreover, as I mentioned at the beginning, psychological distress, so symptoms of depression, can also increase the risk towards supporting for violent radicalization, as well as negative views of our collective identity by others. So if we belong to a specific group in society, whether it is a sport, religious, gender-based, political, and if this collective identity is viewed negatively by others, this can increase our marginalization and risk for support for violence. We can also see that among college and university students across Quebec and Canada, that there's an importance, when there's an importance attributed to collective identity for personal identity, this can increase their risk. So once again, if there's a specific group to that they belong in society, and this is a key factor for them in terms of how they identify personally. So if I just say they belong to a sports team and where they live in this sports team is highly criticized, that can be a risk factor. But also if this sport team is a very high importance for their personal identity, this can increase risk as well. And I give that as an example, but it can really be across any collective identity. Now, preference for online social interaction, as well as worries and negative experiences online beyond just being online. So it's really the quality of the interactions on the internet, social media, and their preference to be on social media is a risk factor for all youth levels. And this will see how that plays in with the resilience factors when we're looking at social support and quality interactions in person. So when we look at social support, once again, across all youth levels, this is a protective factor for reducing the risk of support for violent radicalization, as well as religion and religiosity. So this provides a community of support, of interactions, and people that they can interact with, and has a protective factor. Moreover, having a positive future orientation is a protective factor for college and university students. So when they have direction in life and they see that they see a positive outcome that they can go towards, this is protective. As well as having meaning in life. So if youth feel like they have a purpose and they have something to work towards, this reduces essentially the risk of turning towards VR. Lastly, in terms of resilient factors, a fair and democratic relationship with teachers among high school students. And I'll just mention this because it'll be particular in Montreal. High school students are the ages within the study that I'll be presenting afterwards is 14 to 17-year-olds. So this is really reflective also of the college age for youth learners in Wales. Lastly, I just noticed that this popped up on the left side in terms of risk factors. Feeling unsafe at school among high school students is also a risk factor. So when we're thinking about social support, having good relationship with teachers, knowing that the environment they're in is a safe environment are all factors to take into consideration when we're looking at youth going towards nonviolent activism versus violent radicalization and violence in general. Lastly, academic performance is a protective factor, and this we can think of when we look at a global aspect of how youth are interacting in school and their relationship with the academic system. So when I move on now to one of the studies on the high school students, so this was conducted in the Montreal region among 6 public secondary schools. And what we saw here is we're trying to understand the difference between violent and non-violent radicalization. And the key point I want to look at here is that 1/3 of adolescents support non-violent activism and non-violent radicalization. So this is the largest group, and this is fascinating to see that there are youth that have a desire to bring about change in their society in democratic ways and not using violence. So we can also see that only 15% of adolescents support violent radicalization without supporting non-violence, and there's 18% that support both. What's important to keep in mind here is that violence and nonviolent radicalization are not necessarily associated. So what explains these differences? Youth who are experiencing more discrimination and victimization, higher insecurity at school, lower academic performance, and less family support. So these are the key things that I mentioned in the previous slide as well. So it's really important to ensure that youth are properly surrounded by their family, adults, and the institutions that they come to every day. When we found in terms of certain ideologies among youth, we saw that glorification of violence was associated with more support for violent radicalization and less activism. That 1 out of 3 students supported masculinism, but this was not necessarily associated with support for violence. So it's really important, as I mentioned, to differentiate an ideology that makes us uncomfortable, but that's not supportive of violence per se. War-related stress is associated with activism and support for violence, but also with depression. And lastly, environmental ideologies are also associated with more activism and more support for violence. The key takeaway here is when we're looking at school democracy. If we can see here, the green line is a high school democracy. And as school unsafety increases, we see that the support for violent radicalization does not increase very much compared to the black line that with a low school democracy, as school unsafety increases, support for violence does. So having a democratic school environment, good relationship with teachers can be protective factors, even if youth feel unsafe in the environments that they're going through. So these are some messages that we saw from youth through qualitative focus groups that sometimes no one wants to speak out loud. I find that at school, we're supposed to have a bit of time to learn how to talk. Then one youth is looking at discussing with teachers, and they mentioning that they get everything wrong when it comes to certain discussions together. And what's really interesting and what we're trying to bring about is that it's about making room for young people and hearing their voices and allowing them the chance to engage in society. Oh, sorry. And one last thing I wanted to mention about this side is that youth hold grievances, but they need support to understand and outputs to channel it and express themselves. And when we don't offer these spaces, oftentimes it can go towards violence and support for violent radicalization. So now how can we open and create a dialogue for this? Some practical implementations that we saw from a scoping review is that the most promising interventions are having steering away from didactic approaches and really integrating peer discussions, role-playing simulations, and practice-oriented contact. So really that engaging opportunity to have discussions and get youth engaged in conversations. I'll leave this at this, and all this information is available on the next slide that we'll share for tools, and I can share in the chat as well if you do have any more questions. But I did want to have time to this last slide of the approach to take in general and things that we should try to avoid. So in general, we really want to be welcoming and show curiosity and interest in others and validate their emotions. So this is really different from distinguishing disagreement and aggression. So if there are conversations that or hate speech, we need to condemn these. But this is different from someone bringing up a conversation that may be uncomfortable and we don't want to speak about. So initiate dialogue, offer spaces for these discussions, and really show empathy and kindness and respect towards everyone, whether it's the youth learners or the teachers that work with these youth, as youth see what is modeled among staff as well. And if ever you feel overwhelmed, to really seek support and return to the shared values and rules of the community. And in general, we really want to avoid exclusion, punitive, and humiliating or moralizing approaches, as well as amalgamations, confrontation, and escalation. So usually a quick recourse to external sources that undermine cohesion within the community can be detrimental. And we really want to avoid forms of guilt-inducing and awareness raising. So my key takeaway here is that these discussions will not always be comfortable, and it's quite the opposite. It really takes critical consciousness among adults to accompany young people in this. And there are risks involved, and if we are scared, we need to share this, have a team and a support to do so. So with that, I'll open the door for any questions that you might have or questions or comments. Thank you very much.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Tara. And I think everybody who was on this meeting today will absolutely 100% agree that that's incredibly thought-provoking. Some of it will be new, some of it will be just additional information for others. We're quite tight on time, so I'm not going to invite questions from the floor at the moment. If you do have any questions or points you want to raise, that can be done at the end of the session if Tara's come through with that. Also, we can pick it up in our chat as well. Thank you, Becca, for your comments there. And it's worth reading out about the fact that, you know, the Wales Hate Support Centre is working with cohesion teams, etc., schools, third sector organisations, and this is absolutely, as you said, meaningful insight. So thank you very much, Tara, for this. And I think a number of us will be keen to have a very targeted way that we can build upon your research and learn from it and share it. And you're going to make a real difference, I think, with the work that you and your colleagues have done there. So thank you. Our next speaker is Irene Walker-McIntosh, and she's the Managing Director of the More Collective up in Scotland. The collective addresses digital inequality and has worked for over a decade on projects across the not-for-profit sector with public and private organisations at home and abroad. Irene, we do aim to have 5 minutes at the end of your presentation as well from questions from the audience, but we are slightly overrunning our times because it is a fascinating subject that we're on. So it may well be that we'll do the same as we've done with Tara if you're comfortable with that. But on that note, I'm going to shut up and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And Tara is a tough act to follow, so I will keep it brief and snappy and invite questions in the chat. I can type away after I've finished presenting. Thank you so much for inviting me along today. And I was really thinking about so much that Shan said, that friendship, trust and collaboration that's come through the Taith project, and really those values sort of resonating outwards, and certainly how we were brought into the family was kind of part of that. And then thinking as well about some of the learning that we've had as we've moved through this work, and how those values are actually integral if we're wanting to be addressing misogyny. And that also ties so beautifully into Tara's own research and that idea of the destabilizing convergence, and how really what we need to do is make a space for young people and support the space that they need, rather than go in with our own agenda. And to that, I'm going to try and talk through my slides, but really wanted to reflect that sort of from what I'm hearing from the room today, and how it sort of really overlaps with what we're seeing. So I've already put details for our own organisation in the chat panel, so I don't really need to do that. I'm not joined by my buddy, and I always feel weird without her. But always feel like I need to acknowledge her. So our own starting point in this work was we've been asked by Scottish Government to do a piece of work where we were going to support women and girls that had been victims of violence in the digital space. So looking at digital inclusion for women and girls. We spoke to, I don't know, about 80 organisations, all delivering essential life-saving frontline support for women and girls that were victims of violence, everything from commercial sexual exploitation to domestic abuse, and all the horrors in the middle of that. And staff asked for really specific training and support the women working in those spaces around digital harms, around devices, data, all manners of things. But one of the things that they asked for very explicitly was help with the men and boys. So this was the services that were dealing with the physical impact of misogyny, what that looked like, and the terror that was wreaking on women's lives. And they were saying, what about the boys? So the key, we then started taking a similar approach and speaking to organisations that we knew to be working directly with men and boys. So those safe spaces that Tara had sort of touched on, and certainly when Shan shared with me the work of She's Not Your Rehab, that was the sort of thinking that we're working within. So it's spaces quite often, organisations that are supporting young men and boys that are at risk of entering the justice system, or it might be within schools specifically, or communities of faith. So anywhere where there was support for young boys in a holistic setting, we were reaching out to those organisations and saying to those organisations, what are you seeing? How are young men and boys affected by online misogyny and incel culture? How are they ending up there? And I've posted links to the research in the chat there. It's absolutely centred on the lived and living experience of staff working in these spaces, or community leaders working in these spaces. And this is what we found was the search engine start point, as Shan sort of mentioned, that young men and boys were being pulled into these spaces at every always recognizable points in an adolescent or younger than adolescent journey. You know, how do I make myself look different, or how do I get a girlfriend? So Google was the starting point. That was the pathway into much of this. And that we were also seeing how online harms and offline harms were absolutely inextricably linked, that quite often the online harms was also impacting, for instance, in teaching spaces and in colleges like we're talking about today. And that the adults working in these spaces were really struggling with the language of challenging and the digital skills and confidence as well to even understand the space. There's all these challenges there. But what was also clear from children, young people, young adults, was that adults were needed in the space. And Tara, like Tara's images that she presented there around that sort of destabilising convergence on young people, the wider life of young people. But also what young people are saying is we need that space. So there's a need for adults in that space, and the adults need to sort of reflect on their own ability to give something within these spaces. And there was also a need for contextualised media literacy. And we were lucky because we had a little bit of money from Ofcom at that particular time, all kind of came together, where they were offering us support to explore media literacy. So as a response to what both groups were asking for, so the violence against women and girls and those that were supporting young men and boys, both spaces, they asked for a talking shop. So a lot of us who are working in frontline services and things like that go, that is the last thing I need, somewhere else to talk about these issues. But actually what was being asked for from both spaces was a space of collective care, which is really kind of what Shan was articulating that you've been creating as well in Wales. So it was and through Taith, that wider international partnership, because what it was and what it is a network where we come together regularly to share emerging harms and what we're seeing, what we need, what we're doing, how we're responding, but without adding to anyone's burden. So there's not clear tasks, but it is absolutely a sort of facilitated space to talk about it. So this is how we've responded to our research, was the creation of an online network where we're having these critical conversations while simultaneously testing and learning, starting to look at co-designed workshops with young people. But I would say that that's ended up heavily with community leaders, however they present themselves. So that can be community leaders from communities of faith, can be within schools. It's wherever there are trusted adults, that's where we're looking at how do we sort of embed support in these spaces, and what does that look like, and then how do we bring it back to the network and just talk about what we've done some more. And we're also bringing together and mapping who's doing what in the area. So one of the things that has been incredible in this is that sort of understanding that actually all of us are really struggling with similar issues. And so the opportunity to share, to hear, because immediately as soon as I heard about She's Not Your Rehab from Shan, I took that straight to the group to go, here's what we're thinking, here's other international work that's happening in that space. And then also seeing super local stuff. So we know, for instance, that there's brilliant work being led by Muslim men within the community of Glasgow, really looking at how to address this issue. So by creating the space, we're also learning about that. We're also lucky because we've got Glasgow Life involved in that. That's a sort of heavy anchor organisation, community learning partner, deeply embedded in the council, and they really help us extend our reach there. And we're also finding more and more people as we go through it. So Hillhead Academy, one of the high schools, are doing some really innovative work and working with young men and boys. Alan Bissett has been working in schools in Scotland and England on something called the Bro Code, all of which I can share. But we're also seeing immediately a direct kind of cross-pollination in this sort of prevention approach with the work on violence against women and girls. So those services are seeing the harm caused, and the other services are sort of talking about responses. And what we're finding is that cross-network support is absolutely integral to what we're doing and how that is moving forward. So we are more able to identify emerging harms. So one of the first things that we ask is, what have you seen since the last time we met? What does this look like? What are you hearing? And what are you seeing? Because the digital space is moving so quickly that it's that sort of need to respond almost in real time to what people are seeing, and for us to sort of problem solve together. We're also seeing intersectionality of issues, and again, Tara definitely touched on that as well, that as we're seeing the rise of the far right in Scotland and an increase in racism, then there's definitely that definitely impacts on the lives of women and girls in the violence against women and girls space. We're seeing that, but also we're seeing that intersection within young men and boys and how we might try to help and what that looks like. So we're seeing that there, and I need to respond, and I need to consider what active bystander means again, and that be taken really broadly. So again, really interested in the findings of Taith and what that has looked like as you've been working through it. And we are really able, the more we talk about this within spaces like this, but also within our own networks, we're seeing the number of experts coming forward, the number of innovative projects shared, there are a number of resources being created that can genuinely help all of us rather than all of us start again at the beginning. So I think that ethos of collective care, collective responsibility, and sharing, being open with sharing, is really leading to tangible benefits in our communities in Glasgow and hopefully beyond. That's it in a nutshell. So if you want to ask any questions, then I'm happy to discuss our approach. I've shared our research in the chat panel, but however you want to go. Tara, you've come straight in with your hand up. I'll stop sharing.
My bad. This is. Oh.
Tara, any question? Any point? You're on mute at the moment.
I was just trying to put the little hands and I accidentally raised mine. But Irene,
No
really incredible presentation, and it just accentuates and highlights the need for collaboration between different organizations and the expertise that everyone has. That together it really is a collective effort. So
Yeah.
really well done.
Thank you, Tara. I think the speed at which it's all moving means that organisations are going, who's going to help? And what's been really clear to us as we've moved both within violence against women and girls and incel and online misogyny is that there is no cyber security team coming to help. That's not happening, because we had thought initially going into it, well, surely, for instance, at Scottish Government level or at Police Scotland level, there would be this expertise that was somehow coming. And while there are pockets of that expertise, the dissemination within communities isn't always hitting the mark, or it isn't there. So by sort of bringing these spaces together and also inviting those colleagues with that high level expert report and knowledge or ability to actually get involved if there is criminal activity, that also can really help. But the main thing really through it all has been that deeply relational approach, an ability for staff to say, I'm really scared, I don't know what I'm doing here, and for everybody to feel that sort of support from each other. So thank you, Tara.
Thank you so much, Irene, for that. And I think that what you just said then really hit the sweet spot, in as much as it is very much a recognition that we all collectively have to work together to try and find solutions to what societal issues are arising that we're all dealing with. And we're really fortunate in Wales that we've had this ability to have the Taith Funder. We're supported by MEDA. We've got Estyn on with us as well. Ian, I know, is on the call as well. We're all collectively working together to wanting to be as collaborative as possible, but also tap into the expertise that comes from around the world and other countries such as yourselves as well. I mean, I know we're all British together, but obviously, you know exactly what I mean with the Welsh and Scottish. So I think that please, if you're on this meeting today and you haven't had a chance to look in the chat yet, please also take that time to do it, because there are helpful resources in there and colleagues are calling out to wanting to collaborate as well. We will collate lots of information and disseminate after this particular event closes, but I want you all just to be aware that this is the stepping stone, the next stage to springboard us in order to make sure that we can get the actual societal change that we all want to have, and have our colleagues, particularly in the settings that we work, comfortable with saying, I need help sorting this out, and we can be proactive in trying to help them do that. So on this little quick note now, we're going to have a very tiny comfort break for everybody. Please don't jump out of the call unless you've got something else better to do, but hopefully you won't. Just shut your camera and your mic down just for a few moments. Please try and get everybody get back promptly at 4. I'm giving you a 5-minute comfort break, so anybody fasten their feet, please go, and I'll see you all very shortly.
Way to keep us in line, Kath. Good
I'm
job.
going to, don't you worry. Come on then, everybody. Camera's back on. Oh, I hope you're all with us. So I'm ready to start. Fabulous. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Keith, for keeping me in line. So, welcome back, everybody. Croeso. I hope you're feeling comforted by that tiny little break. So, our first speaker for this session is Trina Price, Director of Quality, Diversity and Inclusion at Continental Polytechnic University in British Columbia in Canada, a beautiful part of the world. Trina was one of the Taith community practice members, and we have learned so much from them during this project. Trina has been instrumental in raising our awareness of adopting a non-binary approach to our work on misogyny. As ever, we do aim to have time for questions at the end of the particular presentation. We might not have that time and might have it at the end. But on that note, I am going to pass over to Trina. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Catherine. So nice to see everybody. Prinhanda. It's really, again, I'm practicing. We're working on it still. Let me share my presentation. Hopefully it works. Excellent. I'm really excited today to be here today to talk about relearning gender. When I was brought onto this program in this community of practice with all of these wonderful folks, I was curious as to, what voice was I going to be bringing? How could I be interacting in this? And pretty early on, I said, hey, can I present a workshop that I run at my workplace called Relearning Gender? And so when we got together in Montreal, I spent an hour and a half, working with the group and talking through this workshop and having a conversation to bring in diverse perspectives, especially from a gender diverse perspective. So I'm going to give you a very quick view of what this workshop is and how we kind of talked about it. And of course, if anybody would like to meet to learn more about it, possibly how to bring this workshop to your colleges or universities, happy to do that as well. A common practice that we do here in Canada that has been taught to us through our Indigenous elders and Indigenous knowledge is a territorial acknowledgement. And so I'm joining you folks from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And what that means is I'm honoring the lands and the nations whose lands I'm on here in what we call Canada. And colonially, I am located just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia. And so I just want to always honor those lands that I'm on. I'm not going to go through all of this, but as Sean mentioned, I absolutely love castles now. And I had never seen one so old, and so I got to see quite a few of them when I was in Wales and absolutely loved it. And Alice took me to Conway Castle here, which is the very first castle. I was just amazed. And so this is a picture of me really excited about being able to touch a castle that was 800 years old under my fingertips. So thought I'd bring that photo in here. But I walk many ways through this world. Definitely my inner child comes out quite a bit. But I use they, them pronouns and identify as a trans, non-binary, queer, white person. And I obviously have other ways that I walk through this world that are listed here. My ancestry is German and Polish. Probably the biggest way that I walk through this world is I'm an auntie, so I don't go by aunt or uncle. I go by auntie, and I've got 10 amazing nibblings or nieces and nephews. And of course, I always like to thank the people that come before me that have taught everything that I'm teaching with you folks today. All right. So I started off with the platinum rule, and what I love about the platinum rule is a lot of us know the golden rule, which is treat others the way that you want to be treated, which is basically the foundation of it, is treat others in a really nice, kind way. However, what I think is really important is that not everybody wants to be treated the way that I want to be treated or the way that you want to be treated. And so what we can do is by applying the platinum rule, which is treat others the way that they want to be treated, and learn from them what they need in a space to feel safer and more and to feel included in that space, like that they belong. And I think when we're talking about tackling misogyny, I think that's so crucial to really think about. Part of it is how do we create safer spaces? How do we decrease this polarization that Tara was talking about? How do we really honor and get to know the people in the space to understand that we might have different needs and different wants, but how can we be in relation together? Also, I noticed I'm talking extremely quickly because I know of the time crunch. If I'm going too fast, just do a little react button. Maybe I'll say like maybe the shocked face, and then I'll slow down.
It's okay. You keep going. You're talking to predominantly a bunch of Welsh people who talk too fast. You carry on.
Sounds good. Thanks, Catherine. So I love this quote, and it really kind of set the stage for kind of my conversation, but misogyny often arises from feelings of disempowerment and lack of belonging. It's essential to explore gender identity with young people, helping them understand the societal pressures that shape gender expectations and why these pressures can contribute to the growth of misogyny. And this quote really spoke to me because it's talking about gender identity, not just in the binary of male and female or women and men, but it's talking about gender identity in a whole spectrum and the whole continuum of way that gender pops up in our world. And I think it's so important to acknowledge that and recognize that in order to address misogyny, we do have to look at it from an intersectional lens of ways that people walk through this world. And then I kind of did a little bit of research. Alice helped me a lot with this research as well, taking a look at what does gender diversity look like in Wales, what does gender diversity look like in Canada. What was very interesting for both countries, both only asked about gender identity for the very first time in our 2021 census. So it's very recent. It's very in the last 4 years, we've been collecting this information. And so based on this, it showed that 0.4% of people in Wales identified with a gender different to sex assigned at birth. So that could be trans women, trans men, non-binary, and all other gender identities. And of course, I highlight that it is more common within younger people as folks are creating languages and learning and realizing that they have a safer space to identify in a different way. We're seeing an increase in gender diversity among youth. And on the Canada side, very, very similar, same thing. 1 in 300 people in Canada aged 15 and older are transgender or non-binary, and close to 2/3, so about 62% of the folks that identify as transgender or non-binary are younger than 35. So again, it's very much this youth, they are feeling the space, the comfort of recognizing that they can find this language and use this language and feel safe to come out as a gender other than what they were assigned at birth. And of course, we have to look at the current climate, both in Wales and in the UK. So as we know what's happening, we know that there's a rising TERF, gender critical and transphobic ideologies that are happening in the UK. So TERF is a trans exclusionary radical feminist. So folks that are using feminism in an awful way to exclude trans folks and say that they don't belong in spaces and that trans folks don't exist. And some folks do view that trans rights and women's rights are very much in conflict when really it's about gender rights and gender equality and equity. And so that's kind of something that's on the rise that we're seeing. We know the UK Supreme Court ruling that Women and Sex Inequality Act refer to biological sex, so it's very harmful towards trans folks. Again, we're canceling J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter, and those kind of things are coming up because these things are extremely harmful, and some of these things are what's happening with the current climate. However, transgender people are still protected under Equality Act on grounds of gender reassignment. Transphobia, we've seen a rise in it since 2020, 2,000 more reported cases in the years 23 and 24 than 20 and 21. But the Welsh government released the LGBTQ+ action plan in 2023. So I know you folks are integrating a lot of that work into your colleges. On the Canadian side of things, and also in the US, because we're very, very, very impacted by what's happening in the US, 77% of sexual and gender diverse youth have been the target of bullying in the previous year than cisgender youth, and so that's been on the rise as well. We see anti-trans laws throughout the US and now taking place in certain areas of Canada, specifically in the province to my east. Alberta has done a lot of horrible laws as of recently that are really restricting, specifically they're attacking trans youth. Obviously there's ongoing protests misrepresenting parental rights and targets and things like that. But I do want to say gender identity and gender expression have been a protected human right since 2017. So we are working on those pieces and they are protected. However, we're seeing a lot of the laws come in that are removing these rights. And so there's a lot of pushback in that area as well. And so trans folks, I think across the world we're seeing an increase in attack on transgender individuals. So part of my workshop is to really kind of break down and look at what do we mean when we're talking about gender identity and gender expression. Some folks might really know this and other folks might not. We as human beings create categories and boxes in our brains about how we walk through this world. And so what I did with the groups, I just kind of highlighted the difference between gender identity and gender expression, talked a little bit about sex sign, birth, and of course sexuality, which you're physically attracted to, emotionally attracted to. And there's so many ways that this may show up in the world. I'm not going to go in depth with this. Again, I encourage folks to check out the Gender Unicorn. But what I really want to express with this kind of slide is to really understand and acknowledge that gender identity, the way that it shows up for folks is a continuum. I think there's so many ways to be a woman. There's so many ways to be a man, and there's so many ways to walk through this world with other genders as well. And we know that there's so much that we can be doing to honor that. And I really encourage folks to acknowledge that gender identity is exactly what it is, which is it's what someone knows to be their gender identity. Nobody can state who someone's gender is. It's what that person knows to be their gender identity. And with gender expression, it's the way that someone walks through this world and expresses themselves. And we understand that some folks may not be able to express themselves in the way that they wish because of the transphobia that is out in the world and the way that society tells people that they should or shouldn't dress or walk through, or like what jobs they take or what things they do. And so also acknowledging that there's so many ways that someone may choose to express their gender through femininity, masculinity, in androgynous ways, neutral ways, etc. And so I think it's really important to kind of look at those two things, specifically with the Gender Unicorn, to acknowledge the differences in the ways that we all present ourselves and identify and use pronouns and our names and even things that we wear and the way that we cut our hair. And so I think it's really important to take the time to just really think about what that looks like. And then kind of I bring it all together in the workshop where I'm talking about breaking free of gender norms, which I really always like to express. I think, like I mentioned, we create a lot of categories in this world, and there's two things that we do. Where we create a pink box or a blue box, depending on what is existing in this world. So, for example, even before a child is born, the doctor looks at the sonogram and sees a vulva, and it's like, this is a female. It's a girl. She's going to, as soon as she's born, she's gonna be surrounded by pink and purple. Is going to be given, dolls, and is going to be told that she's daddy's little girl. Is going to be told that. She has to be quiet and kind and gentle with those around her. She gets a little bit older. She's going to be told about the size, that she has to be a certain size. She has to wear makeup, that she can't have sex until she's married. She's going to grow up a little bit older and find out that she's being told what kind of jobs she wants to be told that she has to have. So usually working in humanities or education or something, a nurse taking care of people, very much kind of that caretaker role in the job. And of course, it's going to be told that she's, going to marry a husband and is going to have kids and is going to have to take care of the family as well as also have a job, et cetera, et cetera. So this is some of the things that we put in the pink box. Then we have the blue box. And in that blue box, so again, the doctor looks at the sonogram, sees a penis, and is like, this is going to be a boy. And as soon as the boy is born, he's going to be surrounded by kind of blue and green kind of colors. He's going to be given blocks as toys, trucks, those kind of things. As he goes a little bit older, he's going to be told that he has to like sports and he has to like working out and he has to build lots of muscle. He's going to be told that he can't have sex. He's not a real man until he has sex. He's going to be told that he's going to have some sort of jobs in the trades or is going to be working in one of those kind of fields, lawyer, doctor type thing, is that he's going to get married, but he's going to be the breadwinner and the caretaker of that the money maker of that family. And then is told that this is kind of the space he's got to hold up, and then sometimes he might have to babysit the kids. Right? And what I want to say, first and foremost, because folks are like, oh, I kind of fit in some of those boxes. What I'm saying is, it's okay if any of that stuff applies to you. If you love makeup, if you, like to work out, if you enjoy sports, if you are in the trades, if you're in humanities work, that's not a bad thing. But what I'm saying is we've made it so strict in these two boxes that it's hard for anybody to see themselves outside of those boxes. And it's hard for anyone to push back against that. And that's where we're seeing misogyny come from, is these two boxes that are causing people to act a certain way and talk a certain way to each other. And to me, is if we can center trans folks in the way that there's this gender fluidity in the world, and we break down gender norms, then everybody has access to all toys as soon as they're born. Everybody has all kinds of ways that their body can be sizes, types, whether they have muscle or wear makeup or whatever. Everyone has access to all clothing that exists in this world. Everybody has access to all the jobs that exist in this world. Family units look differently. There's not this idea of a man and a woman raising kids. It's literally anybody can be with somebody else to be in this space. And if we break down gender norms, you're also going to see many, many things get addressed, but including you're going to see body image issues amongst women go down, and you're going to see suicide rate amongst men go down, because we're telling all genders that they can experience any emotions that they wish. And I think you're going to also see things like misogyny slowly start to be addressed as we also address things like breaking down gender norms. So that's kind of the way I kind of presented this, and really kind of break down looking at breaking free of gender norms. And of course, obviously we go a lot more into this, but that's kind of the introduction level of the workshop that I presented, and really kind of taking an intersectional lens of how can we really be addressing things like this when we're talking about things like misogyny and peer-on-peer abuse, and some of the work that all of you folks are doing across your institutions. So that's it for me. Here's my email, and I also am on LinkedIn if folks want to connect. I'll throw it in the chat, but diolch, and thank you so much for having me.
That's amazing. Thank you, Trina. And I absolutely do think that it is a fascinating aspect. I know that we may well have some questions that are coming up. And I think I just saw somebody's hand come up. If you're able to stop sharing, that would be great. But because the time is very tight, I'm going to pull it to the end, if everybody's comfortable with that, and you're okay as well, Trina, in doing that. But it is extremely important area of work, particularly at a time when we've had, great leaps and bounds in societal change, and then we're beginning to see legislation come through a variety of countries, pulling back, for want of a better description. And I think it's incumbent on us all to try and make sure that we can maintain the momentum that we've had in place for quite some time and not get derailed by a short period of political changes. I'll stop on that point, but I think we all know what I want about. So, Trina, that was absolutely amazing. And I think it is always worth bearing in mind it's a very big piece that we are looking at. And the aim is to try and impart as much information as we possibly can. So I'm going to invite Anne-Marie Lawrence, founding director of Our Voice, Our Journey, and she's based in Wales. It tackles complex social issues affecting the lives of young people and communities by working in partnership and co-creating safer, cohesive communities. Anne-Marie facilitated our link-ups with She Is Not Your Rehab that Sian's talked about already, and worked in partnership with Colega Cymru to run those two events that we had in Wales this year. I say again, we're going to try and get questions at the end, but we are running through time. Time is tight. So we'll see how we go. Anne-Marie, I'm over to you. And once again, I'll shut myself up. I can't see you, Anne-Marie, so I don't know whether you're on mute, but we can see your presentation.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, okay,
Lovely.
perfect. Good.
Thank
Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you. I will get straight into it. So yeah, thanks for the introduction. Our Voice Our Journey is a new community interest company. It actually came out of a Taith exchange that we did with New Zealand and the organisation that I was working for at that time. It decided they're moving away from frontline work, and we were kind of on that trip just having such an amazing time, and then realising like this can't be the end of something because we're just starting something. So it's quite nice that I'm here talking today when the organisation was. I don't think we'd be here if it was for Taith, basically. Our Voice Our Journey, we're trying to sit in a different kind of space than a lot of the other organisations in the sector. We're not here to build an empire or have centres all over the place. We're here to look at problems and how we can solve them. And if we find a solution, then we will share it, because we believe there's room for everybody, and that we're probably never going to run out of problems either. So that's our model that we kind of work towards. We mainly work in the space of violence prevention, tackling gender-based violence, but also kind of about equality. And unfortunately, we're not all born equal, so we want to try and level the playing field a bit where we can and tackle some of the systemic injustices that we see. For the last 3 years, I've been working mainly around how do we engage with boys and young men. This came out of some work that I was doing at the time in schools around tackling peer-on-peer sexual harassment. And there was a few things in the baseline surveys that really stood out to me. So the boys that we were working with were saying that they felt this pressure to be tough. When we asked girls, is that what you expect of boys? There was a very different response. We had a question about did the young people know what sexual harassment was? And they all thought that they knew. And then when we did a bit of a deeper dive, they couldn't actually identify the behaviours. So that told us that their education wasn't quite hitting the spot in terms of giving the young people that information that they need to really understand things. And then there was another part about that as well that really stuck out to me about healthy relationships. We had a question that was, you can be in a healthy relationship if one partner hits the other. And so many of the young people that we were working with didn't say no. And so that just blew my mind. So it really got me thinking about kind of, if that's what our 13 and 14-year-olds are thinking, that that's acceptable and that's okay, where's that going to take us as a society? A lot of our work is based on lived experience and connection and understanding. We found that we did some test and learn work with the Wales Violence Prevention Unit when we first started this work, and it was about what happens when we try and do this, what happens when we try and have these conversations with boys. And there was a few things that came out of it. And one of those was particularly that food really helps when you're working with boys, is what we found. So what we really needed was a catalyst to get the conversation on the table. I know you've already heard a little bit today about She's Not Your Rehab, but I found it in the form of She Is Not Your Rehab. I think when I press the next slide, it's about to show a little video, which is just a short clip from their TED Talk. And I watched this TED Talk and it's literally changed my life in many ways.
I have learned in my job as a barber that colour does not discriminate against family violence and childhood trauma, nor does wealth. For there are men hiding everywhere. And in my opinion, there are very few safe spaces left for us men. Very few safe spaces where normal everyday men don't have to wear a mask anymore. At work, you want to look competent, put on your mask. At home, we want to be the providers, put on your mask. With your friends, with your boys, well, you know, that's where we drink, talk about sport, and mock our way to respect. When us men face any kind of loss, disappointment, grief, regret, shame, embarrassment, if we haven't learned how to take our mask off and be real, be human, be broken, then all we have left is anger. We need to find a better way. We need to be able to see each other so we can begin to heal and stop treating our women like rehabilitation centers. She is not your rehab. Your childhood trauma wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. But your healing now is your responsibility.
So yeah, Matt's message resonated really strongly with me, partly because he talks about this really tricky topics, and he talks a lot about his experience in growing up with domestic violence and with sexual abuse, but he talks about it in a way that I haven't heard anybody else talk. And also boys really resonate with him, they think he's cool. So our very first time when he came to Wales, this is Coleg Cambria in North Wales in 2023. This was the first event that we did where he stood in front of a group of boys. And I realised in that moment, I was sat in the front row and I realised I didn't know what he was about to say. And I spent the whole time thinking I was going to get in loads of trouble off all the teachers from schools that had brought their boys in. Because he talks about all these things that we're just told not to talk about. My background's in youth work and community work, like we're generally told, don't bring up anything that might trigger people, don't talk about this, don't talk about that. And he talked about all of those things very openly. But the response was phenomenal. At the end, he had about 80 boys in a queue waiting to shake his hand and give him a hug because he was inundated with messages. every single time that he does a talk, the same things happen. He does not invite boys to message him. He does not share his socials, and every single time, without fail, they will find him and they will message him. And that tells me that we need to think of us as professionals, of the invitation that we're giving to boys, and the way in which boys want to respond and want to communicate. This little video is some of the messages. It is a little bit emotional, so if you've not seen it before, it's all right. Tears are welcome. Oh, sorry, not again. Yeah, so literally kind of after every talk, the same things happen, and it's really interesting seeing the messages. Matt will often sort of share a lot of them with me, or tell me what the boys are saying, and it's really interesting because all the boys sit and hear the same talk, and they all take different messages. So for some, the talk has been about mental health, for some it's about domestic violence, for some it's about suicide prevention, for some it's about gangs. For some, it's about sexual abuse, and so many boys reach out to him and say, "Your story is my story," and we never know which bit of the story they're talking about. But I think they find a connection in him. So, as Sian said earlier, we did 2 big events with Colleges Wales for learners. We did a workshop for college leaders, and we did a workshop for male learners as well. Some of the key findings that came out of those. Probably won't be a massive surprise, but about the unaddressed trauma that many learners are carrying, and that you don't really necessarily get to find out that. You might see the effects of the stuff that's happened in their lives, but you don't necessarily get to know their story. About the rising aggression and shutdown of boys, lacking of relatable role models and safe spaces for them to open up. That belonging really matters, and then there were some suggestions about solutions for that around mentoring, peer support, small groups, trauma-informed practice, thinking about what happened to you, and about the staff needing to build confidence in the responses, and then the importance of youth voice as well. So this generation are growing up in a world that's very, very different to any of us did, and I don't think we can quite appreciate that. So we need to learn from them about what their life is like, and kind of meet them where they're at, and empower them to help lead the way and be the change as well. So at Our Voice, our journey, we've been doing quite a lot of stuff off the back of the She's Not Your Rehab work. So we asked boys when he came back in April, he spoke to 2,500 boys in Wales. We asked them what else they would like to see. And off the back of that, we're setting up boys support groups across 5 local authority areas. Boys were telling us they want to talk about mental health, that they want supportive spaces, that they want spaces where they can just talk about things. Loads of boys were saying they don't even know how to name their feelings, never mind talk about them. So these groups are set up to kind of help provide some of those kind of spaces where that stuff becomes a bit more normal. We've just ran a campaign that's finished today called Llwybr. That was designed by young people in Pembrokeshire, and they decided to write an open letter to older men about the role models that they want them to be and what they want to see from them, and that campaign's been really successful. I know you mentioned Alan Bissett before, so he's got a book called Lads. It's brilliant. What a lot of boys are saying to us is I'm not going to read a book, so we're doing some work where we're finding boys who will read a book and asking them about how we can turn some of that content into other formats that can reach a wider group of boys. We've got a new toolkit coming out about relationships, respect and responsibility. We're hosting She's Not Your Rehab back in the UK in the summer and possibly again early in 2027. So we're just working on what that's like. I know they'd love to come to Scotland, so let's see if we can get that on the agenda. And we're doing some work around youth leadership as well. One of the things that's really stood out for me doing this work is the potential in some of the young people, and that actually they hold so much kind of power and weight within their peer groups that we really need to be thinking about how we can be utilising that. And they're going to listen to their peers much more than they are to any of us. We've got aspirations, which She's Not Your Rehab, to build an app for boys and young men. And then we're doing some professionals workshops and training as well. So pretty busy. I think that's me. Yeah, that's me. That's the end. But thank you. And yeah, always here to kind of share the work and think about what else we can be doing. So thanks.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Anne-Marie. I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk through that. And I think that a number of the aspects that you hit on today really has resonated for a lot of us. I'm a single mum of 2 boys. They're men now. One of them's a dad himself. But it's a journey. A lot of people, the society has changed for lots of us for lots of different ways. And I think that giving people, individuals, boys, opportunities to have that safe space is absolutely essential. And I think it really builds into how we tackle the key aspects of what we're looking at today, with misogyny and the violence against women and girls. So thank you very much for that, Anne-Marie. I will move us on at a pace, but I know that we'll, no doubt, if there's questions, we will take them at the end, but also please feed any points you want in the chat, because they will get picked up and we will be dealing with them. Okay, so our final, sorry, frog in my throat. Final speakers today are Alice Sherm, the Fairness and Belonging lead at Coleg Cambria, and Lisa Purcell, the assistant principal for learning experience at Coleg Cymoedd. So Lisa and Alice are members of the fantastic Taith community of practice, and they're here today to provide an update on the Peer Abuse Project, or POPA for short, which has been fantastically funded by MEDA, and we're very grateful for that. The outcomes of the Taith project complemented sweetly the work of the POPA project, and work that we now want to go build upon going forward. So please welcome Alice and Lisa. Over to your good selves.
Thank you. Just sharing my screen. Hopefully you didn't get a second of seeing all of your own faces there. Cool, here we go. So we're just going to do a quick introduction to the work that we've been doing in this project over the past 3 years, just highlighting some of our key achievements and then having a bit of think about the next steps. We've made it purposefully quite short, so hopefully we can make back some of that time here. Lisa, I presume you're on the call as well?
Yep, I'm here.
Yep, there you are. Hello. Sorry, I can't see anything now. I'm sharing my screen. So we'll jump straight in.
Thanks, Alice. So yeah, Alice and I were very lucky to be part of 2 fantastic collaborations, the first one of which is this peer-on-peer abuse one prior to our joining the community of practice. So as I think Sian said right at the beginning of this, a lot of this work was started off in not in collaboration, in line with the SEN thematic review that happened
So before the report came out from Estyn, we got together as colleges to discuss what we wanted to do. We'd read the report that Estyn had done in secondary schools on peer-on-peer abuse and sexual harassment. We'd obviously heard things that from everyone's invited that they'd shared out with the people in the UK as well. So we already knew that it was something that we needed to be working together on. And obviously we were all seeing the same thing in our colleges. So we're really lucky in Wales that we have a fantastic network where we know people in all the colleges in Wales. It's a really small group, so we know each other really well. And we knew that we were all experiencing a similar increase in accounts of peer-on-peer abuse. Even though our colleges are very different, you know, some are rural, some are city centre based. But we were experiencing the same sort of problems. So we got together and we used some PLF funding, some professional learning funding that existed at the time to see what we could do with it in view of what we imagined was going to come out of the Estyn thematic review. We wanted it very much to be broader than just sexual harassment, because what we were experiencing in our colleges was more than that. So we were hoping that the thematic review that was carried out by Estyn would just run alongside what we were doing, but we looked more broadly than that. We looked at all types of harassment and abuse that can happen between our young people. It was led by Cardiff and Vale College, and we were lucky to have Cambria, Alice in Cambria, who had a part of her role for the whole first couple of years dedicated to working on this project. So she's done a huge amount of work on this, but every single college in Wales bought into it. When we first launched the idea of what should we do something together, every single college came to that first meeting and said, yes, we want to do something. So although there was a small group of us that took it forward, everybody was on board with it. So our aim was, because it was professional learning fund, our aim was to create resources for staff in order for recognising peer-on-peer abuse and responding to peer-on-peer abuse as well. So that's where we started from. And yeah, like I said, there was Cardiff and Vale were the lead for that with Cambria. But there was about, I think there were 3 other colleges that were all together. There was 5 of us together, but with everyone backing us. So that's how it started. It feels like a long time ago now. It was when I was in a previous job. I think it was over 3 years ago we started that. So over to Alice to what the 3-year project looked like.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so I started writing this and summarising what we'd done over the 3 years and realised that maybe unintentionally we had sort of staged it into doing some learning around it, developing toolkits and then sharing in the final year. I don't think we'd intended that, so it was good to see how that all came about. So in year 1, yeah, we really just started off the project going, okay, what is it that we want to unpack here? We'd started just prior to the Estyn report's publication, so we knew that information and guidance was coming, but we really wanted to get an understanding of what was happening. So we focused that year on the kind of learner survey. So we collaborated with a researcher at Cardiff University who supported with that. And we also undertook focus groups with Rewise with learners to really unpack, okay, how does this issue feel for learners? What are their experiences? What are they actually dealing with? And where can we offer that support? So in that year, we learned that learners with ALN were disproportionately targeted. So we made sure that that survey, again, wasn't just looking at sexual harassment, but was looking at the vast range of issues that we know are happening in our college. And we found that learners with ALN were reporting that they were targeted at a higher rate than other learners. We also found that learners were scared of reporting these issues to colleges because they were scared of that escalation, scared of things happening after the fact once they'd reported it to colleges. And there was a general agreement amongst all of the colleges we worked with that there was a need for more training and a need for more support for learners, because learners lacked understanding, similar to what Anne-Marie just shared with us about the learners she's worked with. They lacked understanding of what it actually was, what harassment looked like, what peer-on-peer abuse looked like. So then we went into year 2, and this was our time for developing and making things. So we undertook more focus groups specifically with learners with ALN to really unpack that piece more, as we'd recognise that that was an area that we needed more focus on. And we found in those focus groups that nearly all of those learners reported having experienced peer-on-peer abuse or peer-on-peer sexual harassment. So then we also looked at developing sort of toolkits, training, policy guidance to really create those resources that can support colleges to embed this and heighten that learning and understanding. So they're linked in there because we recognise that a lot of it is on Hub, which we'll get to, that I know a lot of our Canadian colleagues might not be able to access. So our toolkit really unpacks all of the different types of harassment that we may see in colleges and gives us advice and guidance on how we may appropriately respond to that, and also gives us language to describe things that learners may be experiencing, as we found a lot of them don't know what these things are. So being able to put definitions and labels to things is really helpful. We also developed our recognising and responding to peer-on-peer abuse training. So this is 2 trainings. We collaborated with Everyone's Invited and Victim Support, the Wales Hate Crime Centre. Thank you, Becca, who I've seen is on the call, because your support here was invaluable. And so that's being pushed out throughout colleges now. So staff really have that standardized understanding of actually what does peer-on-peer abuse look like, how can we respond to it in a trauma-informed way, in a way that makes learners feel heard, in a way that's going to support them from that fear of escalation that we know is stopping them from reporting. And finally, then we looked at policies. We recognised that across the different colleges, there are really different ways to talk about this and different ways to kind of monitor peer-on-peer abuse. In some instances, it would sit more closely with safeguarding. In some instances, there were specific policies. In some instances, it would be more closely aligned with like disciplinary. So we really wanted to give a bit of guidance on how we can reflect that within policy. So we made a policy template. And then we went into the year 3 and we were like, okay, we've done all this stuff. Now we should probably tell people about it. So this year was very focused on sharing that and involving the wider community, because as Lisa said, lots of people wanted to be involved and we were really valuable of that. So we really wanted to take the time to share this wider. So we continue to develop the resources using some of the feedback we got from year 2, just to make sure that it really reflected what people needed. So that included the toolkit, the trainings. We developed a set of guiding principles, which we thought were really helpful when we were looking at that policy piece to go, okay, this is what we expect that good practice to look like, based off of the Estin report, but bringing in that wider harassment approach. And we had a final conference, which was really wonderful to get everyone together to talk about these things. So we developed the Hub community of practice. So all of our resources are on there, but similarly, we can share them wider with people that may not have access to that. We developed that framework, so embedding those guiding principles. We also this year undertook a series of workshops, so racism with Yusuf Ibrahim from Cardiff and Vale College, transphobia, we had someone from Stonewall come and join us. We focused on sexual harassment and Everyone's Invited joined us. And then we had one just with the colleges to talk about that data capturing, how we can promote reporting and how we can standardise that across the colleges. We also developed a series of student sessions, particularly for learners with ALN. So recognising that throughout this, learners with ALN has been a strong thread. So we developed student sessions that were very sensory focused, that can support colleges to deliver sessions that raise awareness on what healthy relationships look like, what harassment looks like, how to report things specifically for those learners. So that is a quick overview of everything we've done. To summarise, all of this is available on Hub. So there's an example of one of our student sessions. There's an example of the beginning of the framework. All of this is on the Hub space. So I encourage all of the Welsh people that have access to it to please go join that network. We're still continually going to be updating that with any new stuff that comes out. And if you find things that you're like, oh, actually, this would be really helpful, like we encourage you to share that in that space, because we really want to continue the good work that we've done. Which leads me on to Lisa, who's going to give us a little overview of next steps for this project and all of the others.
Diolch, thank you very much. So our next steps are to bring together the work that we've done on this. What we found out when we were, particularly when we did our community of practice that with the Taith project, was that a lot of the time when we were thinking about how we're going to tackle things and what our next steps were going to be, it's the same as how we need to tackle things and what our next steps are in other areas that we're looking at as a sector. So what we're doing for misogyny is you know, hearing people's voices, raising awareness, finding out from learners what their views are, creating that sense of belonging. We always seem to be coming back to creating a sense of belonging and making people feel safe. How do we engage our young people? How do we hear those voices? And that's the same for anti-racism work that we're doing. There's a piece of work that the colleges are doing on behaviours that they're seeing in across the sector. So what we would really like to do is to bring that all together, and the learner experience group is key in that. So the learner experience group is a group that meets across Wales. Various groups feed into the work that is discussed in that learner experience group, including the equality and diversity group. So that's going to be a key network of people to really push this through now. And we're looking at a charter, like a charter that colleges can sign up to, like a belonging charter, because we think that's where we need to be starting with our colleges. Sharing good practice and benchmarking data is really important for us. I think Alice has already alluded to this before about the language that we use and the categories we use. So we need to decide as a sector how we describe what we're seeing, so that we can therefore report on it and find out exactly what the extent of the problem is. So we are all reporting on things, but we're doing it in slightly different ways. So we're going to work together on how we are reporting, the language that we're using. So we've got a shared language so that we can actually collate that information as a country. And we were very lucky to have Keith and Trina deliver bystander intervention training that they deliver over in Canada when we went to Montreal, been developed by Ending Violence Association, and we met the lovely Ashley when they came back over here in October. And so we would really like to continue that. The bystander intervention training that we were lucky enough to be part of that a session when we were in Montreal. Keith then delivered that to a group of college leaders when he came over to Cardiff in October. And now we would really like to see where we can go to make that Wales specific and sector specific, so it reflects our learners and our experiences and our and how we can best support our staff going forward. And I've put a little QR code up in the top right corner. But we've just been collecting that as a group for the last few months, of just every time we find out some really good resources, every time we find out some good piece of research, then we lob it up there. So do have a look. It's just a Padlet with some ideas, and that we keep updating when we get more information in. I think that's it.
Yes, that is everything from us. I can't figure out how to stop sharing. There we go. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. And it's really interesting about the work that's gone on so far, and also what we want to do going forward. We're lucky enough to have had Ian with us from Estyn, who was the key author, as you know, of that report. And I think there is so much that we've built upon on that, and as a sector actively responded to try and make the changes effective. So that's great work. And also it's really good to see how both the Popper project and the Taith project have worked together and focused clearly on not duplicating each other's work as well. That's not what we wanted to do. So I think that it is been a fascinating process. We do have the opportunity now, if anybody has any things that they would like to share or to raise at this point. I see that the chat's been super active, and thank you for that engagement on there. And please continue to have that level of engagement. But is there anything that anybody would like to raise verbally with one another at this point? It's okay if you don't. Shove your hand up so I can know if I can call anybody in. But again, I'm very relaxed if everybody's just thoroughly enjoyed what we've been looking at and listened to today. I'm just checking through. My usual suspects are all in here. Nice to see you all. Okay, that's great. Thank you. So like I said, please engage actively in all the resources and the sharing information that are in that chat. That it is absolutely oh, Maxine, that's really kind, thank you. So I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you all for attending today, but also thank you particularly for our presenters from around the world to take the time that you've taken and wanting to be involved with us in Wales is just been amazing. So thank you for that. It's been absolutely informative, thought-provoking and engaging presentations from you all. Sian, Tara, Irene, Trina, Anne-Marie, Alice, Lisa, you've literally given us plenty of food for thought, and for everyone who's attended today. I can see Maxine's hand up, so before I say anything further, Maxine, do you want to come in here?
If I may, Kath, just to say, I think on, I know Lisa and Alice and Tom and Charlotte, all of us and yourself who've been, you know, privileged and really humbled, I think, to be involved in this project. And I think to echo Sian's words at the beginning of the session today about what a journey, what a 12 months. And I think when you see today all of the work that has come together, and I know we met really recently in our Canadian colleagues, and it has become a family. It's become a family of a community of practice, and I think to accomplish that in the time that we have has just been a testament to all of the colleges, all of the individuals involved, and all of the support we've had from MEDA, from Welsh Government, from Eston, and from the principals has just been tremendous. So, colleagues, it's just been a real privilege, and I think, you know, the work, as we can see, will go on. But, you know, our Canadian colleagues, we've learned so much from you, and it's just been an amazing community of practice. So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Maxine. I genuinely couldn't have said that any better than that. That is, it really encapsulates how we have felt within this community of practice. And also to flag, you know, obviously we've been talking about the last couple of hours of some could be quite triggering aspects of people. So, you know, please reach out if you need that support as well. But certainly within the general community of practice, we've been supporting one another in dealing with this. I also just want to highlight in the chat as well, Becca and Rosenthal, you've given so much information in there, which has been amazing. Thank you for that. And please, colleagues, have a look in that chat and come back into this appointment, have a look at it again, because there's some key resources there and people are reaching out and wanting us to work. You know, I mean, Irene, you and Anne-Marie, you're going to be inundated. I just absolutely feel that. We're going to pull in as much as we possibly can. And our Canadian colleagues, you are going to be absolutely contacted on a regular basis for more assistance and more engagement. It has been inspiring. I can't really say goodnight and goodbye to you all without saying a massive thank you to the team at Colega Cymru, a small band of brilliant individuals, particularly on this particular project. And for today, Lucy, Rosie, Rachel and Cameron, thank you so very much. You've worked incredibly hard behind the scenes to ensure the event today is running so smoothly. The presentations will also be sent out to you all by Colega Cymru the next few days, and which you can then share with your colleagues. Please share this. We can affect change collectively together. I really do believe that, and I think we all do here. We will definitely follow up on any questions in the chat that have been unable to answer during the session, and we haven't had a chance to really go through some of the queries, but we will definitely follow that up. So finally then, thank you very much for attending this event. It's been great to have the level of involvement, and also I know some colleagues have had to drop off due to other commitments, but thank you for making the time and effort, a very busy time of the end of the academic term. It is a 2-hour-long session to listen to, but you'll come back and listen to snippets online. It'll be helpful for you with some of your staff if you want to dip into bits of what this presentation is about, and then you can build on that within your own teams. But we genuinely hope you found it interesting and informative. That's what we absolutely wanted today. So diolch yn fawr for your attendance today. And also, on my birthday, I just want to say I couldn't think of a better bunch of people to spend the time with. Thank you so much for taking the time to be listening and wanting to have that change. I wish you all have a lovely Christmas and enjoy the festive break, and come back refreshed knowing we've got some good things to tackle in 2026. So thank you so very much for your time, and I'm going to let you go, but thank you.